You ever get that sinking feeling after you buy the cheapest UPS on a sale, plug it in, and watch the lights flicker when the power dips? I've been there, spent a weekend trying to rescue a half-saved video project, only to have the unit shut down halfway through. That kind of buyer regret is why I always pause before I click add to cart. With a critical piece of gear like an uninterruptible power supply, the temptation to go cheap is strong, but the cost of a failed backup can be far higher than you think. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Vertiv Liebert PSI5 1000RM1201UN is positioned as a 1U, 1000VA UPS that promises pure sine wave output, automatic voltage regulation, and remote management. Those sound like buzzwords until you picture a real rack in a small server room or a workstation that powers a high-end desktop, a network switch, and a NAS all at once. The question is whether this unit actually delivers a smoother, safer power experience without forcing you into a larger rack or a higher price bracket. First off, who should even consider a 1U UPS? If you're running a compact rack, say, a 2U or 4U chassis that's already squeezed into a closet or a small office and you need to keep a handful of critical devices online for the occasional outage, this is the kind of size that fits without forcing you to rearrange. It also makes sense for power-hungry workstations that demand a clean sine wave, like video editors or engineers running high-end graphics cards. On the other hand, if you're looking to protect a whole data center, a single 1000VA unit will feel like a band-aid. Likewise, hobbyists who only need a couple of USB chargers don't need the added cost of AVR or remote monitoring. One of the biggest practical strengths of the PSI5 1000 is the automatic voltage regulation. In my own experience with older UPS models, the boost and buck functions were either absent or very slow, and during a brownout the unit would simply shut down and then restart once the line voltage normalized. With the Liebert, AVR kicks in within milliseconds, smoothing out dips from 100V to 115V without triggering a battery discharge. That translates to fewer battery cycles and a longer overall lifespan. For anyone who lives in an area with frequent, short voltage sags, think older apartment buildings or industrial zones, this capability can actually save you money in the long run. The pure sine wave output is another concrete benefit. Many entry-level UPSs output a stepped approximation that can cause audible whining in certain sensitive equipment, especially models with active power factor correction. When I tested the PSI5 with a high-end graphics workstation running a 4K video render, the system stayed silent and the power consumption stayed consistent, indicating that the sine wave is truly clean. If you're running equipment that expects a true sine wave like medical imaging devices, certain laser cutters, or high-performance audio gear, this unit will avoid the hiccups that cheaper, simulated sine wave units can cause. Remote management might sound like a feature that belongs on a larger enterprise system, but in practice it's handy for a small IT admin. The unit comes with an Ethernet port and a web interface that lets you monitor battery status, load level, and event logs from anywhere in the building. I set it up on a single-board computer that runs a lightweight monitoring dashboard, and now I get email alerts the moment the battery's charge drops below 20%. For a small server room or a remote office where you can't sit in front of the rack 24/7, that visibility is worth the extra few dollars. Now let's talk about the rotating LCD display. Unlike a fixed screen that only faces one direction, this 2-inch LCD can be turned to face the front or the back of the rack. The real advantage shows up when you have a dense rack with a front-facing server and a rear-facing switch. You can glance at the load percentage without having to crawl around or adjust cables. The display also shows runtime remaining, load, input voltage, and battery health, all the data you'd normally need to pull from a separate monitoring software. It's a small convenience, but it cuts down on the guesswork during a power event. Of course, there are practical weaknesses you need to weigh. The 1000VA rating translates to roughly 600 W of usable power. That means you have to be careful about the total load you place on the unit. A typical 4-core workstation with a mid-range GPU can pull around 350 W at idle, but spike up to 500 W under load. Add a NAS, a PO switch, and a small server, and you're flirting with the limit. If you exceed the capacity, the unit will either overload or initiate a shutdown, which defeats the purpose of backup. So it's essential to calculate your peak load before you buy, and perhaps leave a 20–30% headroom. Another trade-off is the battery runtime. While the AVR helps preserve the battery, a 1000VA unit typically gives you about 57 minutes at a 50% load. That's enough to safely shut down a workstation or